The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining. I'm just going to hold off a couple more minutes so we can get the last few attendees registered. Thank you. Right, well, good morning everyone. My name is Lily and I'll be hosting the session today. On behalf of us all here at Topia, thank you for joining. Today's webinar speaker is Chris Debner and he'll be talking about next-gen mobility, what needs to change. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. We have muted all lines to minimize background noise, but we really do encourage your questions. So please type these into the question tab and we'll address them at the end. We will also be recording this session. A link to the recording will be sent out in a day or two. Please feel free to share this with your colleagues. With that, let me introduce you to today's speaker, Chris Debner. Chris has over 20 years' experience in the global mobility field, where he has advised more than 150 companies. Chris currently runs a consulting firm in Zurich and provides strategic global mobility advisory and coaching services. He formerly worked at EY in the Mobility Advisory Group. Additionally, Chris is the founder and coordinator of the Swiss SMI Mobility Network and was the EMA 2015 GM Professional of the Year. A true thought leader in the mobility space, we are pleased to have Chris present today. Thank you, Chris.
Many thanks, Lily, and welcome everybody. Very glad that you could join this very interesting topic. I find it myself very interesting, and from the talks that I had, everybody somehow has heard about it or read about it, and there's a lot of confusion around it. And we want to clear up a little bit and also aim at looking what needs to change from a mobility perspective. So what we'll be talking about, I mean, first we should define actually what those millennials and Gen Z people are. Talk a little bit why all that stereotyping does not really give us insight, but then find out what is it? What is something really tangible that they have in common, something that we can work with? But also we want to try to understand, where does it come from actually? I mean, why are they like that? And why are some like that and some are not? And finally, towards the end, we will really look at practical ideas and insights of what does it mean for mobility and what can you do actually to update your mobility programs in order to suit these future or already current customers in a better way. Let's start inside. Definition. I mean, there are various definitions out there, and sometimes they vary from within a few years. But here you can see with the age in 2018 to which group you belong. I can tell you about myself that I'm a Gen X. but actually I don't feel like, but that doesn't matter. It's not about me here. It's about learning more about them. I love quotes, and so here is and studies sometimes. So here's one from the conference board. It's a very recent one, was published in January of this year, and it's the C-suite challenge that they run since years to find out what is the top concern actually of CEOs, CHROs, and CFOs. And what it was this year, for the first time after many, many years where HR was not really on the top, it's really one of the top concerns is attracting and retaining talent. Another quote here, this is from Jason Averbook. He's the CEO of LeapGen HR. That's a firm that helps with HR technology and always and advising on that. He had this quote that if you nowadays want to get the ear of a CEO, tell him that you have a solution to retain graduates for more than a year. So why am I showing you these things? I mean, it should show you the importance and of that need that we need to address the topic of next gen, because it's already up there in the boardrooms, it's being discussed, and if you look at it from a mobility perspective, it should also be something which helps mobility then to align actually with the leadership agenda. And another quote, the youth now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love chatter in place of exercise. Now, who said that? That was Socrates. Long time back, old Greek philosopher. He already had these stereotypes about the younger generation that he had back then. Not sure if they had also a name as we give them names now, like Gen Z and millennials. But what this should show us basically is the end of stereotyping. It's really doesn't make sense to stereotype. But if you look at it, it's always been like that. Older generations observe something new, which is somehow threatening their status quo or the way that they are used to how things are done. And at that moment, they start stereotyping. They start giving attributes to them, you know, saying that this is not good and this is dangerous. I mean, a little exercise I did when I read a lot about millennials and Gen Z was when I saw my parents again, I asked them, I mean, how was it when you were young? You know, what were your parents, respectively my grandparents, telling you about when you started to listen to the Beatles or something like that? And there were also a lot of stereotypes. So stereotyping has always been around, but it's not leading somewhere. If you look at the amount of contradictions that you've seen, what has been attributed to those generations, you will understand that it doesn't make much sense, which is why we should look at some commonalities. Commonalities is really what do they all have in common, regardless of origin, regardless of gender. And these commonalities should help us to have something tangible, something that we can work with, something that we can orient ourselves and our mobility programs towards. Because before that, there was a lot of confusion, and to bring together a few commonalities which are more tangible is an absolutely helpful exercise. So you might wonder what those are. And I found a guy, Yannick Blättler, Swiss guy, himself Gen Z, and he's the founder of Neoviso. And again, a quote from him. He says that the one who understands the thinking of the younger generation realizes the opportunities for a future society. And I really agree with him. And we had some great chats where he gave me his understanding. And he was the one, through his research and being a member of that group himself and many focus groups he held and speaking at conferences as well, he was the one actually who came up with those three elements that really resonate very well with me, and I hope also with you. One was instant. Another need was flexible, to be flexible. And another one was clarity. Now, those are just three words, but so let's go a little bit deeper into each of them and into the meaning of them. This is not yet the meaning for mobility, but if we look at instant, I mean, actually, an app that does not load in 10 seconds will not be used anymore. Google, they give those answers to questions in milliseconds. There is this classic story I heard from someone. They overheard a conversation in an organization where a millennial or a Generation Z was asking actually a colleague a question, and Gen X didn't have the answer, but said, maybe you can ask the boss. The answer from Gen Z was, all right, no, I'd rather Google it. I don't need to ask the boss. So that is the classical things that are happening nowadays. Another example, Amazon. I mean, that is an instant delivery that you're getting for goods, not anymore waiting for weeks or something like that. Or think of any new technology, or if you open up a new cell phone, it's plug and play instead of reading lengthy manuals. So the instant experience is has become very important and has become a need in our society. Flexible. Next gen, they want to watch the news or a movie when they want, and not according to a TV schedule. They don't want to wait for something. I have a godson who was nearly 3 years old only, and he has a favorite comic. And in my old days, a favorite comic was usually played on TV in the evenings at a fixed time. He already understands, 3 years of age. That's not even Gen Z. That's even another generation. He even understands. He just has to point actually to the tablet that someone shows him his comic. Flexible, whenever they want. Starbucks. The way that Starbucks allows you to customize your latte and the range of things you can get there is an expression of flexibility. Fun story, my dad once walked into a Starbucks and ordered a coffee in New York. They did not quite get it. So we have flexibility. We want flexibility. And nowadays, consumer choices to make in daily life have increased massively and providing, therefore, flexibility. I like to quote one example from a car manufacturer. When Fiat came out with that new sweet Fiat 500 some years back, they advertised that you can get it in 500,000 different variations, because you can choose to have one rear view mirror in red and the other one in blue, for example, and everything else. And you might have noticed, if you nowadays want to buy a car, you don't go anymore to a showroom and you walk back home with a lot of brochures and catalogs. No, you go to a car configurator on the internet where you configure what you want. So a lot of flexibility that has come into our life. Talking about clarity, I mean, in a world where everything is competing for our attention, while there is less time available, the more clear and concise message wins the race. This is a clear need and demand of the next gen, that they don't want to have lengthy explanations. They don't want to read any manuals. In this case, they want to have clarity and understand what is happening, where it's going. And another aspect, clarity has two aspects to that, is that at the same time, next gen wants to have clarity about what they want to achieve and what their impact will be. Respectively, what is the purpose of what they're doing? And we live in a purpose economy, and we know that if people have a better understanding of their purpose, of what they're achieving, what their impact is, that they tend to be higher engaged in their jobs and more productive and performing higher as well. Now, this is also very important if you think about, if you come at it from a neuroscientific perspective. I mean, in the neuroscience, they have identified one of our human needs that is all unique in ourselves, is to have a sense of orientation around ourselves, that we can orient ourselves in the life that we lead. And clarity is something, of course, that helps to fulfill this need in us. So even from a neuroscientific perspective, it's validated. Now, you might ask yourself, why is that the case? And what is behind it? Why is it that instant, flexible, and clarity are so important? Well, let's look at customer experience. Customer experience, I just Googled this morning by chance, and I found that when you Google customer experience, you get 1,180,000,000 hits. And that is a topic that we, as we all are customers, have also experienced. There was a lot of investment, and there's a lot of talk about that. There are whole functions in organizations, and you will know them, who are trying to improve the customer experience in these things. CX, customer experience, it's all about attracting customers, engaging customers, creating customer loyalty, superior customer service, and defined customer journeys. And we all know that because as we're all customers, we're all consumers and customers at any given time. But Most of us are also employees and spend a lot of that time also being an employee. And somehow the shift has happened that now it's also expected that what we have as an experience in our lives as customers, it's also an experience that we demand from our workplace. And if you just look at the similarities, I mean, attracting customers, attracting talent, engaging customers or talent, creating loyalty is retention, superior customer service, superior employee experience, the famous net promoter rate, for example, as a measurement. Defined customer journeys. You're talking about defined employee journeys when you talk about employee experience. So there has really been this shift from customer experience that people also want to have an employee experience at the workplace. So let's move on and now make that bridge. I mean, what does it all mean for mobility actually? And if we take a look at that, let's first look once more at employee experience. And if we talk about employee experience has an impact on the whole employee life cycle. We have here the one from hire to retire, which I show you an example. Some say from cradle to grave is another expression. And I searched for some of those on Google and I found several of them. And all of them are missing something. Not one of them has it in there. And the question is actually, which employee experience has the biggest impact on employees during the entire life cycle? From my experience, this is clearly, and I have myself been mobile and worked and lived in 5 countries, the moment is not the recruitment, is not the training that I received or the promotion that I received in my employee life. No, it was really the moment when I went on an assignment, when I became a commuter, when I became like a long-term assignee, when I was localized. These aspects, the whole expatriate, the mobility aspects in an employee life cycle, they have this potential actually to have a real impact to your life. Because what they will do, I mean, they ask you to something that influences not only your time at work, this influences your family in case. This influences your whole friends, your whole social life, because you have to burn the bridges to a certain degree and move to another country into a whole new environment, which is much bigger than the job. So if people talking about employee experience, they should always think about the one that has probably the highest impact, and that is mobility. Turn it around, use it if you argue actually for any investments in mobility, that you are working on the employee life cycle at the point of time where one of the biggest impact employee experiences is created. But let's go into it now, more practical now, a bit of an overview. Instant, what does it mean in mobility? Certainly quicker response times. Everybody would like to have a quicker response to their questions when the business asks a question. What do I need to observe when I send this person from A to B? Whenever you can increase the response times, which is also in response to the general pressure, time pressure that exists in organizations, you can do that and provide therefore something instant, which is also then appreciated. It's a need appreciated by the millennials and Gen Z. Better planning, of course, is an aspect. More efficient processes in general. The use of technology is very important, and we'll go into more detail as we go along with that. And of course, an earlier opportunity to go on an international assignment. Let me give you a fun example that I came across. That was a story I heard that in a large German DAX 30 company, the head of mobility, she got a call and someone was put through from the switchboard, and the guy introduced himself and said, I give him a name, I call him Martin now. He said, hi, my name's Martin. I'm about to graduate later this summer from this and this university, and are you the head of mobility? And yes, was the answer, a little bit surprised from the head of mobility. And then he said, see, because I want to understand if your company actually enables me that should I work for you, enables me to go on assignment within 6 months of my employment. You can imagine the head of mobility, she was speechless for a moment with this question and didn't really know what to say. And before she could answer, he continued and said, because if you don't have anything in place for that, I would not even apply for a job with you. So what are we having? Some say the war for talent is over. Talent has won. So basically, there's a clear need actually to create early opportunities to go on international assignments. Flexibility is a topic that has been talked about in mobility since years, and the traditional way was to go for a segmentation of policies. Instead of the classical short-term, long-term policy, you would have a light policy, a professional policy, whatever types of policies you could have, commuter policies and so on. That has already given more flexibility to the way of how to move employees across borders. But ever more, people are asking this question between equity and equality. How far can we go and still have a consistent treatment of our employees while allowing actually for the always demanded exceptions and the flexibility that the business as well as the assignees demand? So core flex approaches where one aspect that is nowadays often discussed, and also I've seen it in many cases often implemented. A clear example, I mean, I've seen for flexibility, which does not cost anything really, is the freedom to choose your home leave destination. There used to be the old idea that they have to come home to the home, they have to come home to the home country when they have their home leave, and then ideally come into the company, and what they would probably not even do. But give especially next gen and millennials this chance that if they work in Singapore, they can take their home leave to another exciting destination, not in the direction of their home country, which might be interesting to them. That is flexibility. Lump sums. I am not a big fan of lump sums, but I will talk in more detail about it. What we'll now do, we'll go a level deeper, and I have some more concrete examples and about clarity again here. Clarity is very, very important, that you have to consider the high touch versus the high tech. While technology has this ability actually to provide some clarity, clear answers in an instant fashion, you also want to have situations which are probably more emotional and more personal. Might it be like an assignee briefing before the assignment or something, or might it be a cultural training where you want to talk to a person, where it's important to have that. So you have to be clear what their company culture is and how you mix actually high touch with high tech, where you have a human versus where you have technology. My belief is that this is a question that we will face more and more often in the future. I already mentioned purpose economy, and purpose economy really states that you can have not only a purpose, a company purpose, but you also have to break it down to team purposes. And in some cases, there's also the individual purpose. What is it that you want to move? What is it that you want to have an impact on? And I've seen the first mobility teams who have given themselves a purpose as a mobility team, for example, which made it much clearer for all their members, not only next gen, but for everyone, is what the reason for being in an organization is there for. And that was roughly something around, it contained employee experience, basically about creating wonderful employee experiences for assignees and enabling them to perform on the job in the other country. They had it a bit more elaborate than this, but this was the direction. So that the people who formerly were looking at, our job is to ensure compliance, that they had also that this compliance is just a little piece in the clockwork actually of making a great employee experience. Classic example, better destination information. You nowadays can have that, especially on also through technology facilitated, that people get a better clarity about the destination where they're going, even before they're going. That helps with the orientation, of course. And last but not least, cultural training. Cultural training is one of those examples where it helps you to orient yourself in a different culture. I myself made these examples with made this experiences with different cultures, and I always appreciated when I had some insights before in order to have that clarity in my orientation when dealing with other cultures. So that's one point. If we come to instant here, a discussion with talent management, ultimately important, because who will be dealing, and I can imagine that we might have a few talent managers also on this webinar here, but it's not the job of mobility only, actually, to ensure a great employee experience for next gen and Generation Z. It's also the job of talent management, and maybe foremost the job of talent management. Remember back, we said in the beginning, the number one priority, the number one concern rather for C-level was actually the attraction and retention of talent. Now, this is a function that needs to be done by talent management. But since mobility, as stated previously, has this massive contribution actually to employee experience, you need to sit together with them and discuss with them. And graduate rotation programs are a good example for that. Very successful. I've talked with a lot of people. I helped some companies to implement them, where they offer these graduate rotation programs 3 or 4 months in 3 different locations, and you're moved onwards and onwards, and at the end you either stay at one of those locations and be employed locally, or you're brought back to the location where you originated and get a job there. Whenever they laid out these programs, they were absolutely overwhelmed by the number of applications they got, because this is something that is felt to be really, really interesting, and something that helps, of course, people to get that mobility experience early in their career. As we said about instant, that they want these experiences not only when they have worked for 5 or 10 years in a firm, which they might anyway not do anymore, to have those. And now you can imagine such a graduate rotation program that has to be done in alignment with talent management, because they will be in charge actually of the employer's image. They will be in charge of the advertising for jobs, for the recruiting, and so on. And that has a clear link. Instant also to send people earlier on assignment. Light policies have been developed, cheaper policies. I mean, it's not anymore that you get rich from an assignment. We all know that, and there were a couple of crisis situations where the cost was even going down, and we see further cost decreases. We see companies who have host-based policies, who do one-way transfers without return guarantees. I'm not sure if this is the future for everyone, because we will still have some assignees who love their home social security, and some companies and cultures where the people would say, I would not go on a permanent one-way assignment. Not even Gen Y or Gen Z will all be happy with that. So there is a right for existence. Don't switch to host-based policies immediately, but it is certainly one of those things that can help to move people earlier in their career at a lower cost. And here we have another of those X's, that's UX, user experience. The technology is nowadays actually developed to create great user experiences. And that helps you, while in former times, that's the contrary, it was made for functionality. And you might remember that there were some tools and technologies that we used, but we never used all the functionalities because they were not really user-friendly. And nowadays, really, technology is really focusing in the development actually very much on user experience. And then that is, of course, also something that creates a positive employee experience for your assignees. Flexibility. I promised to talk a little bit about lump sums, that lump sum trend that I'm not a big fan for. I'll give you my reasons. First of all, first rule is whenever you do a lump sum, and there are areas where it definitely makes sense, never ever touch actually anything that is compliance related, because compliance is something that can fall back actually not only on the employee but also on the company, and you would forego in some cases also one of the aspects, that is the duty of care, if you would give a lump sum, for example, for finding your own housing. If you think about, if you're in a risky location, which is deemed a hardship location, people might want to save actually on their with their lump sum that they have on their rental choice, and then they end up actually in a very dangerous quarter of that town. So very, very careful about not touching lump sums, compliance with lump sums. Another thing, based on many discussions I had where people were honest with me, said, of course, a lump sum is much easier to administrate than a benefit. But the argument that they said why they implemented a lump sum was, oh, we give them more flexibility. If you think about it, in mobility, yes, you might give them more flexibility, but at the same time, you also benefit from it because there's a little bit less to do. Let alone that lump sums are always taxable and benefits have sometimes still an exemption from tax. Another point is the discontent about choice, which is an interesting one. People need to make a choice with their lump sum of how to spend it. If you have several assignees in the same location, and they all get lump sums and they start spending it, I have the notable case of a group move where everybody of 20 employees was given a lump sum to do something with it. The discontent and the envy that someone made a better choice how to spend his lump sum and what to invest in for his relocation and how to settle in and so on and this and that was massive. And interestingly, it fell back to HR and to mobility because they were the ones who were then asked, I mean, why didn't you advise us on this? And now the last point why you should see lump sums a bit more critically. Generation Z, I mean, when I talk to people like Janit and other people, if you ask them, what is your preference? Do you want a lump sum that you can spend the money as you like? Or would you prefer actually support to make a proper choice of the benefit that helps you in that situation? The answer was that there's a preference for support. And the reasoning was, I don't want to spend a lot of time actually on searching the best benefit for myself. And I would not just be spending the money, I would want to find out what is really the best of me. And I can imagine the moment that I go on assignment, I wouldn't have the time actually to do this type of research and start searching for something that's best. And when I mentioned, you know, someone else might choose something better, there was a clear answer with, oh no, better tell me what is good because you have the experience in going to another country and I want to benefit from that. So take this point of view into consideration and you will see what is often sold as flexibility might not be creating that better employee experience. Okay, that was my rant about lump sums. But let's move on here to clarity. Policies on websites or apps. This is about clarity, having things actually in an easier to access way. If a policy is a 70-page document, what I have come across, don't expect someone from Gen Z or a millennial really to read that front to end. Some policies already have little summaries in the beginning, and you can expect that those are being read, which have the key benefits in there. But the future will really be that you will have a summary, and that's probably a clickable one on a website. So if you want more detail, you click it and you're taken to more content. If you want the details of a tax equalization after you understand the basic concept, you can click on it and you go to the tax equalization policy with all the details. So this will be something of the future. It will not anymore be the 40, 60, 70, 80 page. The record policy I've seen had 120 pages. Don't ask me, they're not using it anymore, by the way, no worries. You won't see those in the future anymore. You got to manage performance and career expectations. This is about clarity. They want to know what is happening to their career. They want to know what is happening after my assignment, for example. Not just coming back from assignment, being repatriated and having that feeling out of sight, out of mind. Therefore, very important, again, to work here with talent management, which can help to get a better understanding how you can cooperate on that. And another funny idea I really like that helps on the retention side as well, but also for the clarity actually of the next gen, is if you set up mentoring programs with former assignees. The benefit for the former assignees is that they, after they return from their assignment, they will feel valued. And they will feel that they can use their expertise. Team them up, bring them together with someone who's about to go on assignment to a location that the other assignee had already experienced. While some of the, in fast developing economies, some of the information might be outdated and the best bar might not anymore be the best bar and the best Italian restaurant might not anymore be the best Italian restaurant, some things will be absolutely helpful. And this is the cross-generational learning where also a lot is written about, where they can benefit actually from that experience. And nowadays, if you just put them on a database, beware of GDPR, of course, but if you put them on a database, it doesn't matter if someone who has experienced, for example, Sao Paulo, who is now based in Dallas, say, he can also be teamed up with someone from Oslo who's going out to Sao Paulo and mentor that person from his experiences. So this would be something that is certainly appreciated for fulfilling the need of clarity for next gen. Another one of my quotes, why is it really important that we talk about this? I mean, by 2020, millennials, not even next gen, not even Gen Z included, will compromise more than 1 of 3 adults Americans. And by 2025, they will make up as much as 75% of the workforce. I would assume that we already have a good 50%. I do not know, of course, it's just a dangerous assumption of the audience. You people out there are also belonging to the Gen Z or the millennials. And we will see that this will only increase. That's why, again, like this point I would like to make, you need to take it serious. But now, what to do about it? And I thought I'd end a little bit with the last few slides of giving you an idea of what you need to do actually to utilize this information. And now that you have 3 tangible things that you can look at, what is it about what you can do? Nowadays, we have more than just those transformational changes in mobility programs. The every 3 or 5 years mobility transformation, where you do your new policies, change your operating model and this and that. Nowadays, it happens much faster. And my analogy is actually, we buy a new phone every 2, every 3 years, and that is like a transformational change because everything is different. And the new Samsung doesn't have a button anymore and these things. But at the same time, we have these apps which are updating like on an almost daily basis. And we see these screens that what all has been updated. So things are moving faster. The world is moving faster. People talking VUCA, people talking about the fourth industrial revolution and these things. What does it tell us? I mean, it's probably in mobility not anymore enough to wait 3 to 5 years for a transformational change, but actually to look at incremental changes, to do something about it when it's needed. And let's look at, when you update your mobility program, that you have these choices. You either go full Monty, do a whole big project and do this, but at the same time, you might want to focus on those small little improvements that you might want to do, where you see that you can change a little process, where you see that you can change a little bit about an operating model that helps to increase employee experience and also to fulfill the needs of the next gen. What are you updating? It's very simple, basically. When you talk about your strategy in mobility and your whole program is comprised of 3 areas. You will always, when you describe your program, talk about either policies, processes, or the operating model. Everything falls into these 3 categories. It is a simplification, and they are, of course, interlinked with each other and influence each other. But it's perfectly fair that when you're not doing a big transformation, which affects all 3 in an independent way, of course, you can do an incremental change for the better in a policy. You can do an incremental process change to help with that one. And you can also have changes in your operating model. And now how to do that? I mean, give you a simple example, especially like if your team is already made up of millennials and Gen Z, why don't you sit together and look at your assignee life cycle? And while you're doing that, you're putting these 3 words on a flip chart. You might want to explain them before of what you learned in this webinar about them, what they're standing for, and then go through your assignee life cycle. Think about, where is there a scope for making things more instant? Where do we have the scope to become more flexible? Or where do we have the scope to create more clarity actually for the next gen? And after you've done that, I mean, you can then write together like all your ideas that you have to do something, validate them, and create a business plan for change out of this. So this is a very, very good opportunity that you're having there. And I can tell you, if you have millennials in that group, in that team who discusses these things, who's involved in these transformations, they tend to love that experience, and they can, of course, bring in also their points of view that you need to align with in the future if you want to be successful. Let me end on with some good news, my presentation, so that we have enough time left for questions and a discussion. It's every generation that loves more instant responses. Every generation loves a higher flexibility, and every generation loves more clarity. So next gen is not that threat, is not that revolution which makes us all change. And if you think about it, the customer experience, from customer experience to employee experience, all generations have experienced actually being a customer and have experienced that revolution in customer experience, that things are getting more flexible, you have more instant delivery and these things. So everybody will embrace that. And that's why I fully embrace, and I encourage everyone to embrace next gen, because whatever you change for the better in your mobility program is something that everybody, every generation will also appreciate. So many thanks from my side for listening in, and now it's up to open up the questions, comments and concerns.
Thanks, Chris. I've actually had a couple of questions come in already, so I'm just going to kick them off. Firstly, what is the role that technology plays in attracting and retaining next gen?
All right. Technology basically speaks to all those three aspects of providing more clarity, more flexibility, and bringing things more instant. Think about instant cost projections. You know, how much will the business like this? How much more instant your assignment can be initiated if you have this ability that you don't need to send off stuff to the Big Four and get 5 days later a response. Think about the flexibility to adapt cost projections when you have an automated way of doing that with the help of technology. Think about also cultural trainings I mentioned before, and online cultural trainings. They're out there so that you do not have to do a classroom thing anymore, but people can schedule, actually, maybe with a doodle or something, they can schedule a session with someone who comes virtual, but a person, on a Skype or a WebEx or something like that, and takes them an hour through a cultural training or two. Coaching can also be provided actually through that medium, and this is where technology helps again with the flexibility. There's a lot of online self-service assignee tools, for example, for obtaining destination information, that you can put that together, which is technology-based. And the last hint to that is, again, balance that human touch where it's needed. I had this high tech versus high touch. This is a point, but technology clearly helps and supports that, all these three aspects, and therefore helps to attract and retain also Gen Z and millennials.
Great, thank you. Another one for you. If there was one thing that you could recommend to start tackling next gen topic, what would it be?
All right, what I would think, I already mentioned it partially, but it's really, you have to contemplate actually what you just heard in this webinar, and then probably sit together, if you really want to do something about it, sit together with your team and discuss with them. Put instant flexible clarity on a flip chart, discuss the assignee life cycle, discuss what can be done to create more instant experiences, more flexibility and more clarity. And I'm sure if you have a few millennials in there or Gen Z in there, they will have the ideas. And then it's all about being feasible to put it together as a plan, maybe as a business case for change, get the funding for it, implement it, and update your program to be more next-gen friendly.
Thank you. Next one. EX costs money. What should I do if I do not have budget to fund a better employee experience?
Good one. Being a consultant, I can tell you, I came across that so often that I had to find an answer even to that one. But people said, well, yeah, we would like to do that, but we don't have the budget. Nowadays, if you want to change something in an organization, they happen when people realize that the benefit from a change is bigger than the investment. So we're talking basically return on investment. So what you need to do in mobility, as they do it in other business functions, is that you have to create a business case for change. And such a business case is not a very complex thing, but it basically shows the status quo. It shows the risks that you're running with the current approach. It shows your suggested future approach or how you want to do things. Of course, the expected benefits that come along with it. And last but not least, the necessary investment. And I can tell you from experience, was it in large transformational business cases where you got like really a funding from your top management when you presented these business cases to them, which was significant, hundreds of thousands of euros in one case, and additional FTE in another case. But also business cases can be used in a way to change just the process. That is, let me give you an example. There was a classical example that I recently came across. An organization had the situation that the business was, and some of you will feel very familiar with that the business was making promises to future assignees before they turned up at your door at Mobility, and came up with these promises like, oh yeah, by the way, Mr. Smith is going to Singapore, and I promised him that his daughter can take her pony along. With those promises, the people then came actually and to Mobility, and Mobility has to turn them down then, and what leads to disappointment and arguments if you want to stay within the policy, or grant the exception, which causes other trouble and costs. So this Mobility team was clear that this is one of their big issues. Why not change this? Yeah, but how to? The business is operating like that and they're used to do it like that. Well, we created jointly a business case for change around it. And that was not a big document. That was a 20-minute discussion, and it was 3 pages. And what it showed was exactly that we looked we put together what's happening currently, what are the associated problems that it caused for the business and for the individual by the current practice as it's applied. Then suggested to do it differently, that the business first speaks actually to Mobility, and then they jointly speak with an assignee, and the benefits that come out of it. And this is something that that was even, an investment was not even much needed. It was a little bit in time, and that time then to communicate this out. But the benefit that came out of it, that now the business doesn't make any more promises, was extremely beneficial.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Chris. Sorry. What are some of the technology providers that you've seen who offer the ability to increase the flexibility without doing a large transformation? And how do you differentiate these providers?
Talking about technology, the market and mobility of technology is very, very diverse. I mean, you have the technology always at those points where you have interactions with your stakeholders. This is one consideration. And then you have, of course, you have your tax providers who provide you with technology, immigration providers, your RMCs, relocation providers. Everybody does that. Then you have the standalone possibilities of technology platforms, such as, for example, ACOS from Topia, of course, formerly Polaris, which were those standalone ones. And then you have the ones which are like Topia being a disruptor, a bit more integrative across those functions in there. But you should not only look for the big ones. Obviously, the implementation effort will likely be a little bit higher. But a notable example I would like to quote for a small one would, for example, be Go Worldwise, is a destination information website you can subscribe to, which also includes actually a cultural assessment and training tool. That is something you have zero implementation effort, but you have something that gives your assignees instant access to destination information and also to cultural training information. So there's a lot out there, and what you should do as a relevant tip is, first of all, understand the technology landscape in your organization, talk to the people who are in charge of that, but then also watch out, talk with people, see if there are references, see what experiences they have made with technology, and also talk to the providers. If you want to do something about it, you might have to invest some time and watch a couple of demos of what is being done out there, and then form your own opinion. That would be probably my tips.
Thank you. I've got one final question as we're running out of time. So my mobility team is staffed with millennials and Gen Z. What do I do with them?
Yeah, wonderful. And this is certainly the case in many mobility functions already. They love to be included with their thoughts. They love to be taken. They love to show initiative. They love to be given the chance to show this initiative. So what I said before, I mean, why don't you sit in a team and consider your assignee life cycle and what can be done actually to fulfill next gen needs, which we learned are needs that everybody would like to be fulfilled regardless of generation. What can we do about it, and involve them in giving their input for doing it? It's almost guaranteed that when they see that they're doing something which increases employee experience, will be something that they themselves value, which will create in them the commitment to do something towards them. And the other possibility, of course, I talked about it before, is come together with your team, including all millennials and Gen Z in that team, and define a purpose with them. It's absolutely legitimate if you align your purpose somehow with the company purpose, that you can give your mobility team a purpose. And your millennials and Gen Z, they will love it because they will see that there is a purpose they're working for.
Thank you. Well, that concludes today's session. I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to join us, and also a massive thank you to Chris for leading today's session. Really look forward to seeing you next time, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you also from my side, and if there are any more questions, feel free to reach out to me.